I still remember the sound the belt made when he pulled it through the loops. Not a snap, not a crack. A whisper. A long, leather whisper that meant the performance was over and the work was about to begin. He always smiled before he hit me. Not the smile he used for photographs, the one with teeth and warmth and the crinkles around his eyes that made strangers trust him instantly. This was a smaller smile. A private smile. The smile of a man who loved his work and was about to do it with precision. My father knew exactly where to strike. The ribs, where the bruises would be hidden by a shirt. The inner thighs, where no teacher would look. The lower back, where the skin was soft and the memory of pain would last for days, but the marks would fade before anyone could ask. He was an ex-Marine, and he treated my body like a map he had studied. He never hit my face. He never left a mark that would show above the collar or below the hem. He was a man of discipline, he told me. A man of honor. And honor in our house meant keeping the violence where the neighbors could not hear it. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you are new here, my name is Talia, and what I am about to tell you is a story about the man of the year. The hero on the poster, the father figure on the television who built a refuge for lost boys while he broke his own daughter in rooms with the curtains drawn. If you have ever watched someone wear a halo made of your own blood, stay with me. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and listen until the end. Because this story does not end with a hug. It ends with a microphone and a witness, and the sound of a belt finally falling silent. Here is my story. I was 8 when I learned that love could be a trap. Before that, I thought my father was a god. He was tall, and he smelled like aftershave and coffee, and he carried me on his shoulders at the county fair. He told me I was his little soldier. He told me I was strong. He told me that families were teams, and that in a team, everyone had a role. My role, I would learn, was to absorb the blows so the world could keep believing in him. My mother was not a villain. She was a ghost. She moved through our house in a haze of prescription pills and silence, her eyes focused on a middle distance where, I suppose, the version of her husband still existed. The one who did not whisper before he struck. The one who did not time his punches to the rhythm of the dishwasher so the noise would cover my crying. When I came to her once, at 10, with a bruise on my thigh the size of a fist, she looked at it and then looked away and said, "Your father has a temper. You must learn not to provoke him," as if being a child was a provocation. As if existing in his orbit was a crime I kept committing. I learned to be still. I learned to be quiet. I learned to make myself small in doorways, invisible at dinner, silent when he asked me about my day. And I learned to write. The diary was a gift from my grandmother, given to me the Christmas before she died. It had a blue cover and a small lock that was useless, but I pretended it kept me safe. I wrote in it every night, starting at age 9, documenting the things I could not say out loud. The dates, the locations, the excuses he made, the way he would quote the Bible before he struck me, verses about discipline and sparing the rod, as if God had given him permission to use my body as a lesson. I wrote about the nights without dinner, locked in my room with a glass of water, and the promise that hunger would teach me gratitude. I wrote about the time he broke my rib at 12, and the story he told the emergency room doctor about my bicycle and the pothole. I wrote about the wrist fracture at 15, and the coach who nodded sympathetically when my father said I had fallen during volleyball practice. The doctors never questioned him. Why would they? He was Glenn Harlow, community pillar, veteran, the man who had just started a nonprofit for at-risk youth called Safe Spaces. He shook their hands with the same hands that left bruises on my ribs. He looked them in the eye with the same eyes that went flat before the belt came off. And they saw what he wanted them to see. A concerned father. A disciplined man. A hero. I escaped at 18. I packed a bag while he was at a fundraising gala, the first of many where he would be honored for his work with children. I took the diary. I took my savings from 3 years of babysitting jobs he did not know about. I took the X-ray of my rib, the one I had stolen from the clinic file room during a volunteer shift, and I walked out of the house while my mother slept in her chair, her mouth open, her pills on the table, her eyes closed to everything. I did not look back. I changed my name. I changed my city. I became someone else. A woman who flinched at loud noises and who could not stand the smell of aftershave, but who was, finally, free. For 15 years, I built a life from the fragments. I got a degree in social work. I worked nights at a domestic violence hotline, listening to other people's stories of fists and fear while I kept my own locked in a box that I only opened in nightmares. I learned to stand straight. I learned to make eye contact. I learned to say my new name without flinching. But I never forgot the sound of that belt. I never forgot the smile. And I never forgot the diary, which sat in a safe deposit box like a bomb waiting for its timer. I found out about the gala by accident. I was 33, working as an event coordinator for a hotel chain, booking conferences and weddings and corporate retreats. A man in a suit came in to reserve the ballroom for an awards ceremony. The state charity gala, he called it, honoring the man of the year. He showed me the brochure, and there on the cover was my father. He had aged, but not enough. His hair was silver now, which made him look distinguished instead of dangerous. His smile was the same, the teeth, the crinkles, the warmth that made you want to tell him your secrets. Beneath his photo, the text read, Glenn Harlow, founder of Safe Spaces, a sanctuary for at-risk youth, honored for 15 years of transformative work with America's most vulnerable boys. I stood in that hotel lobby, holding the brochure, and I felt something crack inside me. Not a bone, something deeper. The place where I had stored the sound of the belt, the memory of the rib, the knowledge that he had built a kingdom on the silence of children while he destroyed his own. Safe Spaces. A sanctuary. The words were poison. I thought about the boys who had passed through his program. I thought about the methods he used, the phrases he repeated, the discipline he preached. I thought about the way he had always said that real men do not cry, that vulnerability was a weakness to be trained out, that pain was the price of strength. And I thought about the diary in my safe deposit box, and the X-ray, and the 15 years I had spent telling myself that justice was not possible because the statute of limitations had expired, and the world loved him more than it would ever love me. I was wrong. Justice was possible. It just would not look like a courtroom. I took the booking. I told my manager I had a personal connection to the charity and wanted to oversee the event personally. I spent 3 months preparing that ballroom. I chose the flowers, the lighting, the seating chart. I arranged the sponsorship banners with the logos of the companies that had funded his empire. I shook his hand when he came for the walkthrough, and I smiled with my teeth while I looked into his eyes and saw no recognition. I was 33 now, not 18. I wore my hair differently, spoke differently, moved differently. I was invisible to him because to Glenn Harlow, women who were not useful were always invisible. But I was useful. I was the coordinator. I had the keys to the audio room. I had the passwords to the projection system. I had the power to make sure that every screen in that ballroom and every camera feeding the live stream to 50,000 viewers would show exactly what I wanted them to show. And I had the diary. I also had something else. During the months of preparation, I reached out to alumni of Safe Spaces. I found a private forum online, place where men who had been through the program gathered to talk. At first, the posts were positive, inspirational, but in the private messages, in the threads that required moderator approval, I found the truth. I found Marcus, who had been 12 when Glenn broke his collarbone during a camping trip and called it a hiking accident. I found Devin, who had been 14 when Glenn locked him in a supply closet for 2 days without food, calling it a character-building exercise. I found 6 of them, then 10, then 15, all with the same stories. The same phrases, the same methods, the same smile before the pain. They had never spoken publicly. They were men now, most of them carrying the weight of a shame that was not theirs. They had been told that no one would believe them. They had been told that Glenn was a hero. They had been told that speaking out would make them look weak, ungrateful, broken. They had been told exactly what I had been told. I contacted them. I told them who I was. I sent them pages from my diary and they recognized the language. The discipline, the honor. The way he made violence sound like love, and I asked them one question. If I give you a stage, will you stand on it? They said yes. The night of the gala, the ballroom was a cathedral of lies. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, men in tuxedos and women in gowns that cost more than my first car. The stage was draped in blue, the color of Safe Spaces, with a backdrop of photographs of smiling boys and testimonials from politicians. The air smelled like perfume and money, and the particular self-congratulation of people who believe that writing a check absolves them of ever having to look at the wound. I was in the control room, 3 floors up, with my hand on the audio board. Marcus was in the audience, wearing a suit he had borrowed for the occasion, sitting in a seat I had reserved. Devin was in the second row, his hands shaking, his jaw set. The others were scattered throughout the room, each one a witness waiting to become a voice. Glenn took the stage at 8:47 p.m. He was wearing a tuxedo and a leather belt that he had, with characteristic theatricality, incorporated into his speech as a prop. He held it up, smiling, and the audience laughed as he joked about old-school discipline. He told them he had brought it to remind himself of the values that built safe spaces. Structure, boundaries, tough love. The belt gleamed under the lights, and I saw Marcus flinch in the audience, and I saw Devon close his eyes, and I felt the old crack in my chest open and begin to bleed. He started his speech. He talked about his military service. He talked about the boys he had saved. He talked about the importance of father figures in a world that had forgotten how to raise men. He was halfway through a story about a troubled teen named Anthony who had gone on to become a Marine when I pressed the first button. The screens behind him went dark. The audience murmured. Glenn turned, confused, still smiling, thinking it was a technical glitch. Then the screens lit up with a page from my diary. My handwriting, aged 9, in pencil. The date. The time, the entry. Daddy hit me tonight because I spilled milk. He said it was for my own good. He said I need to learn. He used the belt. It hurt for 2 hours. I am sorry I spilled the milk. The audience went silent. Glenn turned back to the crowd, his smile still in place but his eyes beginning to search for the exit. I pressed the second button. The screens showed the emergency room report from when I was 12. Costal fracture. 5th rib. Patient claims bicycle accident. Attending physician notes. Inconsistent with fall pattern, possible non-accidental trauma. Father present, dismissive. No follow-up requested. I walked out of the control room. I walked down the stairs. I walked through the silent audience and I took the stairs to the stage. Glenn saw me. He did not recognize me at first. I was too old, too different, too visible. But then his eyes narrowed and I saw the moment he understood. The moment the smile vanished and the flatness returned. The look he used to give me before the belt. Talia, he whispered. I took the microphone from the podium, not from his hand. He had already let it go. My name is Talia Harlow, I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I had practiced in mirrors, in empty rooms, in the nightmares where I finally spoke and the world finally listened. I am the daughter of the man you are honoring tonight, and I am here to tell you that the belt he is holding is not a prop. It is a weapon, and I am not the only child he used it on. I looked at the audience. I looked at the cameras. I looked at the 50,000 people watching from their homes. From age 8 to age 18, I documented every strike, every lie, every medical report that was falsified. I have a diary with 347 entries. I have x-rays. I have the testimony of a child who was told that honor meant silence and who is done being silent. I nodded to the control room. The screens changed. They showed Marcus standing in the audience, his face wet with tears he had been taught never to shed. My name is Marcus, he said. His voice was shaking, but it was loud. I was 12. He broke my collarbone on a camping trip. He said I fell. He said real men do not cry. He said no one would believe a troubled kid over a hero. Then Devon stood. Then another, then another. 5 men, then 6, then 8, standing in a ballroom full of tuxedos, speaking in voices that had been locked for decades. They repeated the phrases. This is for your own good. No one will believe you. Real men do not cry. The discipline of love, the architecture of strength. Every word Glenn had whispered to me in the dark, now spoken back to him in the light. Glenn stepped back. He raised his hands, palms out, the gesture of a man who had never been forced to defend himself. This is a misunderstanding, he said. These are troubled individuals. My daughter has mental health issues, she always did. I interrupted him, not with shouting, with the diary. I opened it to the page I had marked, the entry from the night before my 18th birthday, and I read aloud. Tomorrow I leave. I am taking the diary. I am taking the proof. I am taking my body, which is broken but still mine, and I am going to wait. I am going to wait until the world gives me a stage. And then I am going to show them what kind of man you are. I closed the book. I looked at him. He was gray now, not distinguished but diminished, the silver hair suddenly looking like ash. You are not the man of the year, I said. You are a man who built a fortress out of broken children. And tonight, the fortress falls. I walked off the stage. I did not wait for security. I did not wait for applause. I walked down the stairs, through the audience, past Marcus and Devon and the others, out into the October night. The fallout was immediate. The sponsors pulled their funding before midnight. The governor, who had been scheduled to present the award, issued a statement distancing himself. The Board of Safe Spaces resigned en masse. And Glenn, faced with 15 years of documented abuse and the testimony of a dozen survivors, lost his nonprofit, his reputation, and his freedom within a week, not to a prison cell, but to a social exile so complete that he would never again be able to smile at a camera and be believed. I did not watch the news coverage. I did not read the articles. I went home to my small apartment, and I sat on my couch, and I held the diary in my hands and I cried. Not for him, for the 9-year-old girl who had written her first entry, for the 12-year-old with the broken rib, for the 15-year-old with the fractured wrist, for the 18-year-old who had walked out into the dark with nothing but proof and patience. I cried because she had survived, and because she had finally been heard. 3 months later, I opened a refuge, not a nonprofit with a board of directors and corporate sponsors. A house. A small, blue house with a kitchen and a garden and a living room with couches that were soft and safe. I called it True Spaces. I funded it with donations from strangers who had watched the livestream and sent money with notes that said, "I believe you." I used it to house survivors of family violence, teenagers who had been told they were crazy, adults who had been told they were ungrateful, anyone who needed a room where the curtains stayed open and the locks were on the inside. The first resident was a boy named Anthony. He was 16, he had been in my father's program. He had the same look in his eyes that I recognized from my own mirror. The look of someone who had been hit by a man who told him it was love. I showed him his room. I showed him the kitchen. I told him he could eat whenever he wanted. I told him no one would check his body for marks. I told him he was safe. He looked at me and asked, "How do you know?" "Because I was you." And I got out. And now you are getting out too. He moved in that night. He is still there. He is learning to cook. He is learning to sleep without flinching. He is learning that his name belongs to him and that his body is his own and that the men who hurt him were wrong about everything. I am still learning too. I still flinch at loud noises. I still hate the smell of aftershave. I still have a rib that did not heal right, a small ache that reminds me on cold days of where I came from. But I also have a voice. I have a house. I have a diary that is no longer a secret but a testament. And I have the sound of a belt falling silent, replaced by the sound of a boy learning to laugh in a kitchen where no one is afraid. I am Talia. I am 33 years old. And this is not the end of my story. It is the first night I slept without locking the door. See you in the next story.